The last session really is going to be all about what can the EU do. So Hugo, we have our eyes on you. Mariachiara, we have our eyes on you. Now, we want to really think about how we can translate some of the things we are learning into what actually can be facilitated by the EU, which direction could be helpful, how can we do this, both in terms of policy and in terms of funding. I think actually the recommendation we are going to avoid is give us more money, because you know this. This is not a new thing. So we really want to talk about all the other ways that it can be, that adaptive heritage reuse or adaptive reuse more in general can be facilitated better on a local, on a national level, but through what the EU can do and facilitate. So for the first half hour, we have a session a bit more focused on policy. For the second half hour, we have a session a bit more focused on funding. They will kind of speak to each other. That is 1 hour. Hannah is going to keep me on time. So then after that, you are free to come to drinks, yes. And we can talk further about all the ideas we have planted in your mind. So for the first half hour, I would like to invite to the stage Mariachiara, please, Sara, and Katarina. Yes. And yeah, please do, yeah. I think maybe I'm going to stay here, then I can, then I can move a bit, otherwise I will just be, So, they are going to introduce themselves a little bit, because I think that makes more sense than me trying. But just to say that we have tried to get, and we managed to get, someone from the European kind of context, someone working in the local context, and someone working in a more regional national context. So to kind of think from different governance perspectives, these kind of questions of facilitating and policy. So the mics, we cannot keep them at the same time on, because then it's going to be crazy. So please turn it off if you don't speak. But maybe, Mariachiara, you would like to start?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. I'm really thankful for this invitation, and I feel privileged for 2 reasons. First of all, because we see, we as Commission, in reality, something happening from the path of funding that came from us. And secondly, because it's really a rare situation, an exception, to be able to attend an event for its whole extension, let's say, and to be also in a listening mode. My name is Mariachiara Esposito. I work at the Cultural Policy Unit of the Education and Culture Directorate General of the European Commission. And we are in charge of a number of actions that are very much touching upon horizontal dimensions of culture. And we work a lot on mainstreaming cultural policies into the other programs, as well as on methods of cooperation, on one side with local, regional, European, pan-European stakeholders, and on the other side through more structured types of cooperation methods with member states through institutional bodies that are foreseen in the framework of the European Union regulations and legal system.
Thank you very much. Who would like to continue? Sara?
Hello, I'm Sara Vermeulen. I'm a policy officer at the Flemish Heritage Agency. We advise the Minister of Immovable Heritage of Flanders government, and we also implement the policies, the heritage policies. I'm also very thankful to be here today. I think it's always really interesting to hear what kind of projects exist in adaptive reuse. I mainly work on the topics adaptive reuse for churches, but also on funding. So I can answer all questions about it.
Wonderful. Katarina?
Good afternoon. My name is Katarina Maksimov. I'm from Novi Sad, working as an architect conservator in Institute for Protection Cultural Monuments of the city of Novi Sad. I don't know, I think that I'm the only person from the country that is not EU. Oh, well, so it's really... no way, hello. Yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry.
Also no longer.
Brag, yeah, I know. Sorry. I'm coming from the country that is really complex in so many ways, but what we can say is that we have really a lot of heritage, cultural heritage, but at the same time, as we are proud of it, we have so, let's say, weak legal frames and all the other administrative and mindset for the way we are protecting it. So I hope that I could participate in this today with any of my experience. So thank you.
Thank you, all three. My name is Loes Veldhuis, by the way. Sorry, I didn't say that. So from some of the work we've been doing in OpenHeritage, we are starting to develop some recommendations. They are on the screen, but because we only have half an hour, I'm going to squeeze this a bit and kind of focus mostly on the first one and the last one. And I think really to start with the question of integration of heritage and adaptive heritage reuse as a tool into other policies and into a wider range of policies. And we know that this is already happening. This is already, of course, the narrative that the EU has in mainstreaming heritage, and to some extent it is going into urban regeneration and it's going into some of the social policies, but we think we can push this much further. And I think especially on the sustainability side, on the green financing, on the waste management, on recycling, material waste, all these kind of questions, there is a lot to gain from implementing, let's say, adaptive heritage reuse as a tool to achieve some of the policy goals in these other settings, in these other policy contexts. So I think it would be really interesting maybe to hear from Mariachiara first, to kind of think about a bit what the EU is already doing and how you are trying to push this. And then maybe also from the other two to think a bit about like how this is happening in your current situation, but also what would be helpful for you to kind of maybe, if you think this is a relevant recommendation, to kind of push that forward.
Thank you for this interesting and very broad question. Actually, I think it's so broad and full of aspects that could be dealt with that I'd rather prefer to start with something very specific, which is in a way a reference point for this kind of topic and in general for cultural heritage at the EU level. You know that every year the European Union has labeled years. This year is the European Year of Youth, for example. And in 2018, we had the European Year of Cultural Heritage, which was really the occasion to mobilize a number of forces that gathered together in a way that was kind of unprecedented, because such a context of a European year allows situations that are not only, you know, the mobilization of energies across the year, but also opportunities for rethinking an approach towards that specific topic. And this is exactly what really happened, in particular in the field of heritage. And it was really one of the cases when the decision of having a year on that was the result of a strong pressure that came from all different levels that indeed needed to look at heritage in a more integrated and innovative and shared way. And starting from there, the topic of reuse in a way became part of a rationale and part of a narrative, because it was resulting in a number of funding opportunities that indeed, with this effort on mainstreaming cultural heritage in other programs, brought forward the possibility to label adaptive reuse and in general regeneration of territories leveraging heritage, because leveraging heritage was the main idea behind the year. And then it became more technical and more applicable through programs, and indeed the existing opportunities out of which, for example, also the project that you are running came out, for me is, let's say, an implementation of something that was there in the thinking and in the making of new cooperation forms of thinking funds for the future, but also thinking policies for the future. So if on one side we have this technical aspect where there are funding calls where adaptive reuse is indeed a reality that is applicable through projects, in particular in the field of Horizon, but also very much in fields where cultural cooperation is the topic, like in Creative Europe, for example, which are the two main, I would say, EU managed programs where culture and cultural heritage is more and more prominent. Still, the work that we have done with the drivers that we have in the Commission, as I said at the beginning, that are not only legislative or financial, allowed to mobilize all these forces also to create new reference points where, for example, the topic of heritage use is seen as an overarching aspect. And I'm thinking in particular of the specific publication that we developed together with ICOMOS, which was one of the most active networks which cooperated with the Commission and with many other authorities during the European year. They produce, and they have now recently re-edited this publication on a number of criteria that are called quality criteria, quality drivers. And the title of this publication is the European Quality Principles for Cultural Heritage Interventions, or to be even more precise, for EU-funded interventions that even might have a potential impact on cultural heritage. So indeed, the topic of reuse, also under the scheme of structural funds and cohesion policy, became very central to this debate, and this existing publication, which is a reference for all the managers, practitioners, and heritage policymakers that have to design policies and interventions that either are directly targeted to fund cultural heritage sites or buildings or renovations, or targeted to invest on the sustainability of a territory, should consider the quality criteria in terms of avoiding damages or unsustainable interventions that may affect in a negative way cultural heritage. And out of this, the thinking about how to reuse and renovate and transmit a different value, even symbolically, to heritage for a different use, is the result of all these different forces that have these specific milestones that we achieved since the year 2019.
So how do we push beyond? So how do we make adaptive heritage reuse not something we do, people in this room, but people that are developing green financing tools or waste management policies or NO2 or CO2, whatever these things all are. Policies.
Continuing in this sort of integrated approach where heritage is mainstreamed in all funding programs and vice versa, wherever there is an emphasis on greening, on sustainable or Green Deal objectives, also in other components of our policies and funding. Heritage is one of the assets where the incentive can allow also being rewarded as an authority if there is a green investment. For example, under Horizon Europe, there is a specific collaborative partnership which is called Built for Environment. And under this partnership, which is included in one of the other pillars of Horizon Europe, not the one dedicated to cultural heritage, but more to the environment, it has indeed included a specific chapter where applicants have to or can look at heritage sites and buildings as those vectors on which they can create and design and build a specific project through the use of materials that are more sustainable or greening, a number of ways of reconstructing. So all the priorities and objectives that you were mentioning. And another way, I think, is to emphasize what are the different methods and types of funding that can be tabled and mobilized. And also in this respect, in our opinion, it's very important to facilitate, because this is also our role as a cultural cooperation unit, to facilitate the exchange of practices and knowledge about other existing schemes. So not just the public ones that we are in charge of or national and regional authorities manage, but also those schemes where private and public institutions cooperate with each other. So alternative funding for heritage is one of the most effective way to achieve reuse and to link it to the green and the sustainable priorities and dimensions in other investment and in other sectors as well.
Rolf, Levente. Good news. Sarah, do you mind responding a bit from your perspective and the Flemish situation?
Okay. I think the first thing we did in Flanders for in heritage policy is we got a criticism that heritage was not really actively worked on to achieve other goals from other policies. We always, in all legislations, practically, we made an exception for heritage. And the result was that, well, they said you put heritage in the freezer, you can't use it for anything anymore. So we changed that, and now we, every time there is a goal from another policy, we go and negotiate how heritage can be included in that policy. For example, for energy goals, installation goals. Before there was an exception for listed heritage. Now we do research on which level we can achieve for listed heritage on installation demands and etc. We did the same in projects where we really encourage the use of heritage. We try to really accept the demands on, for example, accessibility. But what we see recently, and I think it's interesting to share this experience, is that now in Flanders, the public starts to react and say, well, we want heritage to be actively used, but they're starting to come to develop some kind of alienation. For example, in the Gravensteen project here in Ghent, where we allowed to build an elevator next to the tower. Well, the public reacts and says, this is not what we want. We want heritage to stay the same. So it's kind of a dynamic we are following, I think. Maybe from the government point of view, we're just taking it a step too far? I don't know.
Well, I think you have that responsibility to push this. It's not always the point of listening to what people think they want. And also, if that means other people are excluded, then maybe you can take that role of saying, this is important anyway. But yeah, I was wondering, do you also take adaptive heritage reuse or heritage as a tool to achieve a sustainability? So not just to put climate change measures, but to really think it in a different way. So like, we don't do new build, we do reuse because it's more sustainable.
It's a difficult question to answer because when it comes to sustainability, people look at the comfort needs and they say, well, it has to be warm in here, and it's not possible when we can't insulate or anything else. But when you look at really the total cycle of the building, I think all these buildings have already proven that they're sustainable and they don't have to do anything more for the future because they already paid their price, I think. Yeah. So I think when it comes to sustainability goals and adaptive reuse and circularity, I think the other sectors can learn a lot from the heritage sector. I think we are by restrictive legislation, we pushed the adaptive reuse of these buildings. So I'm really interested to see how from now the other goals, from sustainability goals, I heard about in the Green Deal that they are looking into putting restrictions on demolishing buildings with materials that aren't reusable. So I'm just wondering about how can we implement the techniques that we learned in the heritage sector to achieve other goals. Because if you have a concrete building and these days it's not reusable, maybe we have to say you have to keep it the way it is, because otherwise you create waste, and that's not what we want anymore in this sustainable society.
Katarina, do you want to respond?
I don't know if you can follow my way of thinking.
I was thinking I will try to referee on this topic as a conservator and as an engineer and as an architect. Firstly, I want to say that in my opinion, the best way to save the heritage buildings in areas is to find the proper use for them. Sometimes the original use is the best use to save the heritage, but on the other times, when you have, I don't know, some industrial buildings that they are not in use anymore, you have to reuse it. So considering that, use and reuse as a tool to preserve and to protect the heritage is the main thing. On the other side, when you were talking about materials and so on, one of the, I think the most important thing when you think as a conservator is to use and reuse materials on the site. You should buy and get new materials, and only on that part of the building, when you are, I don't know, rebuild it or something, or conservating it, is when you don't have it on the site. So it's also sustainable. Those things are something that people like me on my job should really take as a must. So I think that, since I already told you that where I'm coming from, I think that this is the way I can answer to this use and reuse topic here. But also I want to say that since we have so complex politics and legal frames, and usually heritage is something like Bergen, you know, you don't want to deal with heritage and people who are in charge of taking care of heritage and so on. Most of the time people really have to be creative, and in those legal frames that we have only that. If they really like and feel and love, usually those are local communities, then they can success, you know, the bottom-up policies. So I would like also to say something about one example from Novi Sad, which is the part of this, the Novi Sad is the second largest city in Serbia. Belgrade is the capital, and this is the second one. And this is the part called Almaški kraj, is one of the oldest parts of the Novi Sad. And for many, many years, maybe more than 20 years, the Institute was trying to legally protect it, but the government and politicians didn't feel that it is the right way to do. They usually want all those property to rebuild with new buildings and to have, you know, more incomes from taxes and so on and so on. But the local community made an NGO, and they did all the job. You know, they pushed everyone. They pushed the institute where I work. They pushed politicians. They pushed the mayor and so on and so on. And today, after, I don't know, I think maybe 10 or 15 years of their constant work on protecting their area, and they are not in conservation job. They are like doctors and so on. They managed even to get to the Faro network community, to be on that network from, I think from last year. And every day, they don't stop. Every day they are doing something and trying to save this area. It's now listed. You know, it's a part of the city that is listed. And I think that all those kinds of layers and jobs, and then if everyone do their job, the world will be
such
better.
a nice place.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
But I think it's a really good, so we have 5 minutes for this discussion left, so it's not a lot, I know. But I think it's a really good jump actually to the third recommendation, which is really thinking about how can we facilitate and offer that kind of local support and kind of jumping the level of the state, really going into the local communities, the local groups, the local buildings, any of those things. Thinking about place-based funding, let's say, and of course that is already happening. And also these kind of networks are really important, of course. So it's not just funding, it's networks. It's projects like this where we are kind of also creating a situation where you have the direct investment in a living lab or in an action zone through the Horizon projects, but then there is many more like the awards and labels and I don't know, all these kind of things that are already in place. So how can we, I guess it sounds like that is something very helpful that local communities can take in their own hands, but also how can we do this more? How can we do more of this, and how can we kind of maybe also build these networks further?
If I may say, just spread the word. You know, I mean, I'm the only one here from Serbia, and I've heard so many good things and so inspiring stories. So I will spread it over I don't know, my office and so on, but maybe EU or all those partners in these projects should maybe try to continually speak about it, you know, just to get more people to hear it.
Yeah, to really have also access to a database of examples and case studies and knowledge.
To be inspired with other people, to find something that they could use in their own stories. So,
which, in fact, we have a database of knowledge and examples, so we should definitely plug that here. Yes, you can go to the website and see it there. Thank you. I don't know if you still have a very, very brief response, Mariachiara or Sara or both.
Well, just to complement what you said, I think, and this idea of the further development of databases and sharing of practices, I think, of course, this is the first part of the job, and it's very important that all the projects that we found, like what you're doing, normally has this activity as part of the work of the project. So it's a sort of multiplier effect. The more projects we found, the more databases and case studies collection and possible exchanges we will input for. At the same time, well, I trying to put myself in the shoes of stakeholders, so not in the ones I am in at the Commission, I would say that this will never be enough, in the sense that still there is the need for funding and the need for facilitating methods and tools to be put together. So, of course, when I speak of mobilizing forces, it's about putting together information, but also putting together resources in terms of not just funding, but also in terms of capacity building, co-creation and collaboration to not to disperse energies when it comes to ways like the reuse aspect or the quality principles I mentioned before. So I think that when we speak about place-based support, we have to think really the notion of, which corresponds somehow to the first part of the previous question, the adaptive world, because adaptive really means that you cannot forget what was the original value and use, but you cannot forget either what is the adaptation needed by the context. So place-based means that you have in mind the needs of the community, and that's why I'm saying that we need more. We need further funding, but also further ways of directing those funding, and like we're trying to do in some calls, to the objective of making even the applicants and those that submit projects thinking in a way that the general principles of the code that has to be applied is applied according to the context in which it has to be implemented. And I think for heritage, it is of particular relevance, especially if we want to leverage the importance of cultural heritage for other policies, thinking, for example, of urban regeneration. It can be led by a certain use and investment on cultural heritage, but only if it meets the needs of the community. So that's for me the most important.
Sara, you want to add something?
Briefly then, at the Flanders level, we are also convinced of the importance of the local level. So we are implementing new laws on creating policies that it's a policy that makes the local level as an equal partner to the regional level. So we are very excited to see what will come out of this. We also think about, when it comes to funding, creating more like envelopes for local authorities instead of asking them to ask for funding for this project or that project. We believe that the local level is capable enough to decide what they need, when and where. When it comes to place-based support, we have some instruments on the regional level to support this on the local level, like management plans, integrated management plans, for example, where we combine nature goals and heritage goals, and the funding is combined on the regional level. So when you have this plan on the local level, you don't have to decide if it's heritage or is it nature. It's just one side where you have different needs for funding together. And also on the adaptive reuse for churches topic, there is this instrument called Paris church policy plans, where you make a plan for the future of all the churches locally. This is an instrument we took from the United Kingdom, and now we see that it's also used in the Netherlands. So I think maybe on the EU level we can do something with that as well.
Great, yeah, sharing experiences, of course. I think for this part of the conversation, we will have to leave it to this. I would like to continue much further. So I think thank you very much for this part. I invite Levente to the stage to take over.
Thank you very much, Luz, and thank you for still being with us. I know I'm the last one. We are the last thing between you and the cocktails, so we'll be very quick. But let me just start with a very short anecdote. Because we want to talk about money, and we want to talk about how ideas about money can change very much how you can, of course, imagine or push further the limits of the imaginable. And I would like to pick up on Mariachiara's comment on alternative funding is probably the most appropriate way or best way to make sustainable adaptive reuse projects. So in 2016, very interesting table that was chaired by Rolf Novihui from Stiftung Trias, and we had two other groups sitting at the same table. One was a group of activists from Budapest who were looking at ways to build social housing or cooperative housing, and the other one was a Dutch Serbian couple, also from a movement to build affordable housing in Belgrade mostly. And if we move a few years further, I can tell you that 2 years ago already, or maybe even 3 years ago, they created a fund, a regional fund, that is called MOBA, that is a regional fund in order to support this kind of project. It is a fund that so far has no money. It only has a little startup grant to figure out its structure, but it is there. And another news from this very same table is that on next Monday, the Budapest team will present its social real estate development agency that they founded. And all this was inspired by that very lucky moment that they were all sitting around that table. And also, another aspect of this whole process that a few years ago, the Budapest team started together with a group of entrepreneurs and activists. They were fed up with always having to move because of gentrification and the changes of the increasing pressure on the real estate market, and they decided to buy a building. How did they do it? So they were looking for loans. They went to all kinds of banks, but they wanted to buy this collectively. They didn't want to take the risk as an individual. They wanted this to be a collective property. No bank recognized this as an opportunity. Also, they were a cooperative, which was not really a very well-known format. Here we are all cooperative, which is great, and also in many parts of Europe we are all cooperatives, and this is great. Nobody really recognized this format as from the side of a bank. So what they did, they needed 500,000 euros, which is not enormous amount compared to what we see here, but they needed this money. So they went to friends and friends of friends, and they raised the 500,000 euros with loans from friends and friends of friends, for which they pay between 5 and 10% interest, which is huge. So think about, exactly, so think about how much burden is on this initiative in order to make feasible this project. But the project is there, it's been feasible for 3 years, it's survived the COVID, they diversified their economic model. So it is there, even with the 5 to 10% interest rates, it's there. But let's try to imagine something. What if we could create access for these initiatives for a bit more friendly financing? What if we could think about some public money, eventually some European public money to help these initiatives, no? So I would like to invite you to this little exploration of how can we imagine this kind of opportunity. And for this, we have a last little roundtable. So I would like to invite Rolf to be with me on the stage, and Anne from Stadsmakers and also Stephen from Symbiosis. So please welcome them. And what I would like to start with, because you already introduced yourself in different contexts today and yesterday, so we all know you more or less. But I would like to start with Rolf, just in one sentence. How does Trias Stiftung, well, one sentence would be a bit difficult, but in very shortly, how does Trias work in the sense of supporting with affordable loans or supporting with money to initiatives?
Yeah, thank you. In short, yeah. Well, usually we are contacted by housing groups trying to take over a new building or renovating, taking over an old building, renovating it, or having a new one. Mostly they renovate, and they simply ask us, can't you buy the land and we buy the house? We always work by heritable building rights. That gives us the possibility to safeguard the aims of the project and generating income, and with the income, as it must be by a foundation, we fulfill our task and our aims, and that made us strong. We grew from nothing, from an idea in 2001, founded in 2002, and we are very lucky to have 30 million equity by now, and 50 projects, 70 real estate objects. So, and that's what I meant this morning. It only took us 20 years, to get a bit financial strength, because strength only came after, let's say, 17 years. Okay. Yeah, and we consider ourselves not only as a foundation, but also as a solidarity fund to help. We help the projects, they help us. That gives us the strength for the next one. Yeah, so you go to, initiatives come to you, you go and you see if they're feasible, you support them with a legal model, you support them with also training or kind of better access to banks, and then the money they pay to you throughout the years that you reinvest in other projects. Anne, could you describe very briefly, you're also in a way operating a similar fund, so you're helping, you don't have this kind of split ownership model that Trias is operating with, but you are supporting real estate projects with a social value.
Yes, so I'm from Stadsmakers Funds. We are very young, 18 months old, so we are a startup, and we're a cooperative enterprise as well. We don't work as much in the residential market, but mostly in community kind of projects, socio-economic programs, well-being, healthcare kind of sectors. And what we do, we started up with about 80 cooperants who invested in our funds, and then the Stadsmakers Funds in turn invests in projects for up to now, and thereby opening the doors also for those projects to get bank loans in the commercial market, for example. So it's a facilitating role that we play, and then we have the business model for the funds and for the projects to stand on their own feet, and we financially, the returns come from the projects back to the fund, and then a 3% interest rate for the initial investors or cooperants of the Stadsmakers Funds. That's in very short, and a very big focus on positive impacts and transition, sustainable development, and so on.
Okay. Soon we'll get to the demand side, but still the supply side. And your organization got I think more than €1 million investment from 70 individuals you mentioned, and you're also helping to direct other investments in the project. Rolf, Stiftung Trias is operating a lot with donations, right?
We have donations, that's right, 30 million, but we have another 10 million loans. Yeah. And many of these loans are from private people or from other foundations. and from alternative banks. So it's quite a mixture, yeah. But that enables us to make even more, have a leverage effect, yeah.
So, yeah, please.
Our corporates have shares in the cooperative enterprise. So that's another model. Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is a little bit, and then we come to when an initiative needs money, no? Because we started 2 days ago the visit, or actually we finished the visit with the conclusion that you have a loan, you actually bought a building, Stephen, but you would like to have a better loan than this. So my question is to all three of you, what could you imagine, how could you imagine working with public money? Or are you already working with public money in terms of, because what we see in Europe in many occasions that there are all kinds of investment streams into real estate projects, into infrastructure projects, which are with very low interest. And at the same time, we see all these initiatives struggling with this 5 to 10% loans, while they're creating a lot of values, they're creating a lot of social impact. So how could you imagine, and I know we've had this conversation several times, and I saw a lot of skepticism and criticism, but how could you think about operating with public money or public loans? Are you working with any kinds of public loans, or you're exclusively working with private money?
I have to think what you mean by public loans. We work in public-private partnerships. So that's we have some projects where we work together with a public partner, and we put our investment funds together and work with them on a single project. That's what we do. And for other projects, we work with subsidies. But I don't know if that answers your question of public loans. Those
public subsidies are a part of your model, but probably they're not part of the big chunk of money that is needed for renovation or for. Partly, yes.
Partly is, there's some, European, like the relance, the means after Corona crisis, we had some pretty big subsidies for really the structural investments in the buildings for one of our projects, for example. Yeah. Okay. And we also see that our projects don't seem to be feasible without at least a little bit of help. Especially because we're not in the residential markets, and therefore our profits are lower.
Well, public loans, I would divide it into the foundation and the project itself, because that's two separate financing blocks. And for the foundation, I'd say, no, we don't necessarily need public loans for us, because we have the donations, we can take up loans, and we have all these engaged people who help us. And they really like to help us, they're idealists. But for the project, it would be very helpful, because you heard of Predico, but they were asked, do you have favorable rents, or very low rents for low-income people? No, they don't have. Why? Because it's too expensive to restore a heritable building, and interest is too high. And so if they would have lower interest, they could make lower rents. It's quite easy. And so the effect, the leverage would be much higher. And I mean, that's what I'm always telling, if there's a societal advantage, and you want to have it, then you have to pay for it, because they can't pay for everything. It's really ridiculous that they even pay, as I know, €2 per square meter more rent than usually is paid in that area, just to live in that place, and because they see a high value in living in a community and restoring that building. But they do it mostly by their own strength, and they would need more help. Yes, that would be a good instrument.
Okay, so we have a bit of a need for this kind of possibilities. Stephen, your foundation bought a beautiful monastery building here in Ghent. Teresa is the name of the bar that you can all visit and you can see the building. What works and what doesn't work in this loan that you got from the Flemish government?
What works is that we got a long-term agreement with the Flemish government concerning the acquisition of that building. We think it was too expensive. And if it's too expensive, then we end up being a little bit more expensive project, which we don't want. But if I'm allowed, I have been thinking about your questions for the entire day today, and I think we have a momentum here, because when I hear Ursula von der Leyen talking about her European Bauhaus and whatever, I think if it's not coming now, it will never be the moment. So this is our momentum, and I have been thinking about, okay, how could European Commission or whatever be an answer to what we look for? And I was thinking maybe we have to set up or reflect upon impact criteria we want, or Europe wants, according to their policy. Maybe it's sustainability, maybe it's inclusiveness, maybe it's social interaction or whatever. And maybe we, thinking about that, we might end up with an impact bond. And one could imagine having a loan where the interest is related to the impact you generate. So I think this would be two things at the same time. But then again, it takes some effort and some time to set this up and to convince the people that it's worthwhile. But then again, I think it's worthwhile.
Okay, so we have a momentum. We also heard that there's a growing synergy between the experimentation that is financed by projects and maybe potentially the big money that is giving money for investment for cities and maybe even structural funds. So we see maybe there is a momentum like this. And for example, for you, what would you need in order to extend your activities? Would better access to public loans, like cheap loans, would it help you, or would it make you put more pressure on your kind of organization? So how could we make the offer that you make, the possibility that you give to initiatives across your region to be more widely available? What would you need for that to a little bit extend your territory? And this is also a question to Rolf. I see you thinking very deeply. Maybe you need a bit more time for that.
You mean specifically from the public side?
Well, what are the conditions that would allow you to grow and support more projects, and including what would it mean on the public side? Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about from the public side, because I think the challenge for us is to get the bank loans from the private side. We kind of make the first move as Stadsmakersfonds and invest in something and put on the table an amount, like we work with a model of 30%, 70%, so 70% bank loans. But we see, in fact, as you mentioned, that the classical conversation that you will have with a bank doesn't value the added societal value that you want to realize in a project, and that it's difficult, or that in the beginning of a project people warn us for this kind of project, that you're probably not going to get a loan. And that's, I think we invest a lot of time in finding the correct financial project without putting too much pressure on our project, the right financial product to not. Yeah. That's what was on top of my mind, but I can't make the correct link with the public side, and maybe you can add to that.
I try. Well, I'm not thinking of Germany and my own situation, because Joep de Roo and me, we are quite of one opinion that, as we say, we are on the island of happiness within our countries. There's a good structure, there's enough money, and a lot of activity, and when we do civic projects for 20, 30, 40 years. So, but if I'm looking Europe-wide, then I'd say we need a lot. This morning we had the question of structure, I mean, in many countries, we just don't have any structure, any institutions for fostering a civic project. And I'm not only talking of heritage project. I mean, heritage projects are a wonderful example, but it's really broader. It's not only a residence project. It's culture. It's working with young people and whatsoever. I mean, that's all enriching society. And what we need, what we have to develop somehow is like things like financing institutions with small amounts. Like it's nice to get 50 million from European Investment Bank, but it's too much money. I mean, that's new that I say it's too much. Yeah, but it's sometimes you only need 500,000 or a million or only 150,000. So you don't have a structure. And that's only the money. Then what we need, if, well, once again, in the morning we saw a project on a good way. I mean, Predico is in realization, that's clear. But the others are on a good way. What we did not see are the ones who failed. And they only failed, or many of them failed, because they didn't have enough support. They didn't even know how to organize themselves. They didn't know how to finance themselves. They didn't know how to go, what subsidies they can get. So that's what we need is a consultancy capacity all over Europe, and which is able to, to give consultancy, independency on the legal system in Serbia, in Poland, in Romania, and wheresoever, Portugal. That's completely different. And the next step is where I see that, especially for not for the middle class, but for the poorer people, projects fail, is they just don't have the equity. They would buy, they have nice premises and houses and old schools and factories, and would say, yeah, let's do that. Let's help together, as you said, with loans from friends and friends and friends. That's the power of a community, how they can finance. That's really the miracle why we can finance our project. But if you don't, if you have such a low income, you can't. So what we need as next is an equity fund to help them. And if you have the equity, then you get the money from the bank, or private financiers have the confidence, yeah, they will get it. They have a good plan, they have a business construct, they have the equity, they pay the rent. Why shouldn't that work? So, and that's it. And then maybe even joined by favorable loans, and that's it. And then we can have 10 times more projects than we have today.
I see a plan emerging here, but let's go to Stephen first and then we come back.
I think I agree entirely with what Rolf says. I think, again, we had some talks with the EIB, and of course we're not a partner for them. But I can imagine if there would have been a partner between our projects and the EIB, just a single point of contact for them, and maybe we could imagine some kind of a quality certification or whatever, so that these people can sleep good. And I agree also that we need some support for the projects, because most of them do this for once and the only time. So they always make the beginner's mistakes, and you need to, after 2, 3, 4 times, maybe you know how it's working. So I agree with you.
And your projects are very much focusing in one region. But what is that you could export from this knowledge for example, an international organization, if we were to imagine an international organization for this purpose exactly?
I think I've been thinking about that question also all day. I think the model can be exported easily. Also, what you've done, or what you've explained, it can be exported easily, but I think it's difficult. That's what I'm thinking about, and I'm still thinking about. It can't be upscaled as we started it up, and then we'll scale up for entire Belgium and then, I don't know, countries, neighboring countries. That's my opinion today, because as I explained also during the coffee to you, I talked about the human factor in the previous session. It takes, to make those kinds of projects work, and that cooperative way of working as well, it takes a network, and there's always a community and a network around you and around the projects, and if you can reach that community or that network from the position you're in, you're too big, and I think it won't work. So I believe more in the acupuncture of different similar organizations that can learn from each other and work together, for sure. But I don't believe in a huge
centralized
European no. And I think it puts a cap. That's maybe why I'm still always thinking about it again and again. I think that puts a cap on how much we can do, or I myself can do.
Yeah, but upscaling doesn't mean a big organization. Upscaling means maybe 3 organizations per country. And I'm looking on the, on the representatives of the European Union, and because I don't even know whom to address to ask for more support. I mean, it's easy to ask for money, but as a, I'm a banker, and I say, if I invest money and I get a big return, why shouldn't I do that? I mean, to the best of the European Union and the people who live here. We do have a potential in civic groups that we just don't use. We have so many tasks before us. I mean, if you hear current climate change speakers, then it's getting cold around your heart. We have only 15 years to change the situation. So that's it. And we need everybody to change it. And civic society is the most active one. In Germany, the government didn't act. Who acted? I mean, were the people who put the solar panels on their roofs. Whatever the government said, they did it by themselves. So why don't we need that potential, use that potential? And with small money, getting a big result. And that's, it's not stupid, give me more money for my plans. I'm not asking for my sandbox or for my private playground or for, we call it, in Germany, we call it the green teachers middle class. Yeah? No, it's really bringing us a big step ahead. That's why I'm looking for money, as I just explained, equity, consulting, loans, funds, whatsoever, to solve the future problems we have. Otherwise, we'll give our children an earth that they don't want to have. Yeah.
And then Stephen. And Stephen?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that, as I'm thinking now and sitting here, that you want access to money, to put it bluntly, but it has to be money in a kind of partnership context. And that's what we are afraid of in early stages, especially of projects, that if you go looking for that subsidy that is, I don't know, directed to youth in urban context, I don't know, there's always a goal connected to a subsidy. Or if you have a large bank loan, it will always put some kind of pressure or some kind of goal in your project. And that's okay, but you have to be ready for it, and it has to be in a dialogue and in a partnership kind of logic. Otherwise, you lose your touch with your own project. Yeah.
So we need the partners that have similar values that we do. That don't put pressure in the name of a value that you don't share.
Yeah, there's a relationship of trust between the administration giving you the subsidy and yourself, or that there's some kind of,
but I'm not going to wrap the initiatives in money, you know. No, not at all. If they don't bring their own money, I wouldn't support them. I mean, I must see that they really work hard for their aims, and otherwise they won't survive. I mean, I think we agree in that completely. Even, let's say, the consultancy money. I was asked in Germany, wouldn't that be a good idea to have more consultancy money? And I said, yes, but only 50%. The other 50% must be paid by a woman and man who want to have this project. Otherwise, it's not their project. They have to work for it. They have to suffer for it. You know, that's it. Otherwise, it's carrying them in a
I'm from Hungary, and I can tell you how flooding an area with money doesn't help. It's very counterproductive. Yeah, Stephen, and then I would like you to think about the closing, like some idea what to do next if we want to create better access to funding and maybe using some European money. What would be the next steps? But Stephen first.
Let's combine both ideas. From what I heard Anne say was an answer to the first question you asked to me was, you said you have a loan for this monastery, you want to get rid of it. I think that's what she said was important. There was no partnership with the Flemish government, and we felt it. And so if there is a difference in aims, then it doesn't work. Okay, this is the reason why we did that. To finish, and I think for me, the OpenHeritage program is about to close up, from what I understand. And I have the impression that it's just a moment to get started and basically get some boots in the mud and do some research by doing. And I think this is about the moment you've created this momentum and all this knowledge by all these partners you have gathered around. Let's do it.
Anne?
I think I have the same message, that take the initiative and start. I think also my Flemish context that was explained earlier today, it shows there's a lot of instruments there, there's a lot of support accessible to you.
In certain parts of Europe, and this is why we talk about half of Europe which has absolutely no access to these.
Yeah, but also that category that Rolf and myself are working with, the category of friends, family, and fools. That you use friends and friends of friends, but I think in the startup world that's what they say: friends, family, and fools. That people that believe in what you're doing, and that's always a community that you can start with if you want to take an initiative and to get that first, to reach that first stepping stone, and then let's see what happens next. But that's always how I choose to keep on moving and don't get paralyzed by.
Okay, so this is a message to the ground. So people they shouldn't get paralyzed. They should look for friends and friends of friends. Hopefully they have money for this. But going back to the question of you don't believe in a unified organization, you believe in more local communities that have an overview of their assets and their communities. But still, again, half of Europe doesn't have these kinds of institutions, doesn't have access. So how can we create a solidarity mechanism that would enable the projects which are feasible, which are viable, because they have their local communities, they have the know-how, or they can have the know-how with the kind of consultancy that we're aiming at. So we're not talking about one institution, but we're talking about maybe a fund that would actually help different initiatives across Europe. Rolf, what do you think? What would be the next steps to create this setup?
The most things I'd already mentioned, but the next step would be, as I see, development work, how can we help others? I mean, I remember the days in Budapest very well, and this couple trying to have affordable rents in Serbia. It's like standing in a desert. They didn't have anything, not even water. And just helping them, where no structures are at all, and just as helping them in developing such structures, that would be the next step. And this cannot only be done by volunteer work. It's travel charges, it's personal costs, and so that would be the next step we need. And for the moment, I don't have any idea where we could get the money from. So if you have one, please tell us. I think it's Levente, it's Joop de Roo, it's Christian Iaione, that he's already he left us. But there are a couple of people who really stay for this topic, and we would be happy to work further on and see what we can do.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that we have to close here, but this is good because we don't close this conference as finishing something, but we close it by starting something, starting a discussion. So I hope you will join us on this next journey to try to build some kind of structure that would enable also community-led urban development initiatives in more marginalized or poorer regions of Europe, but also to give more opportunities for the more prosperous parts of Europe. And I hope European institutions will be on board with us, and we will harass you a little bit, and we will reach out to you to find out about different channels we could support this initiative with you. So I think I would give it back to Hanna, I guess, or Hanne, for a closing remarks and to tell us about the drinks.
Sorry, no summary from me. That would be so nice that I should have taken notes then all day long, but I was doing other things. But thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you for the consortium for the last 4 years and for you today. Definitely don't miss the reception.
Yeah, what is there to add? Thank you all. It has been a long, interesting day. We were very grateful that you were all here, and I hope we can still have 1 hour of interesting conversations and perhaps see each other later on in the restaurant. Yes, and if anyone has questions about the visit tomorrow to TimeLab, please contact me. Just mention that you still want to join. The details now? Yeah, so normally if you want to know where it is, it's on the poster for the location. So at 10 a.m. we are meeting there. It's near the Dampoort station. So also if you want to take your luggage, I'm sure that you can then jump on the train home. And from 11:30 until 1, there is also a buffet, so some kind of lunch. But you did have to already subscribe for the lunch. But I counted in some people extra, so that's it. Thank you, everyone, for being here.